Good afternoon, and welcome to Tug of Heart with Marianne and Lori. Hi,
Hi,
Lori.
Vanakam.
Vanakam, welcome, welcome. And here we are at the end of 2020. Exhale,
Let's
right?
focus on the here we are bit.
Here we are. And actually,
We
that is really important because if we are here, that means we survived.
yes.
And having the privilege of surviving 2020,
The privilege. Yes,
right? With
yes.
all the obstacles and loss that has happened along the way, then it becomes imperative to pause
Yes.
and be here and begin to look at how did we survive? And last week we posed the question, what got you through, right?
Right. Variety of answer, but same pulse.
Yes.
How would you describe it, Marianne?
Well, I went around, asking everybody, so what got you through? We're at the end of 2020, and I got a lot of mundane responses,
Right.
right? Because there was a material world that was very dangerous that we had to get through. So things like, just TV shows, going out for walks, Amazon delivery service,
Fair enough.
right? So those kinds of questions, those kinds of answers. And then I shifted the question slightly and I started to ask, what was your saving grace this year?
Oh, straight into the deep.
Dive in.
I haven't
Dive
even
in.
thought
I'm
that
like, these
far.
answers I know already, but what was your saving grace? What saved
Wow.
your soul? Has your soul been saved this year or not? But then the answers were relational. And within the relationships that people answered, my relationship with my family, my relationship with my pets, my
Oh.
relationship with nature, within that lives this element of the divine. So when we ask a question, what was your saving grace? It is somehow the answers came back was this way of maintaining a connection with something bigger than the natural world.
Oh, yeah. And even I would say the mundane, the walks, the Amazon,
Yes.
the TV shows, which
Right. Really helped.
it goes back to what we say: the natural points to the supernatural. So all of it, at some point, is bigger, and we know that because it did work. I mean, if it's hour by hour, then that's what it takes. But
And it does go back to this concept that we're trying to unpack in this show, which is tug of heart, right? All our hearts were under attack,
oh my gosh,
under
yes.
deep attack. And what resuscitated us, what saved us, what helped the blood to continue to flow is this love that is present in this kind of connection with
It's
something
amazing
bigger.
because to hear that connection and a relation save people in circumstances that so unaccommodating for to foster these types of things.
Oh, exactly.
And here we are. Here we are.
That's human beings are so
The
beautifully
resilience, the heart.
resilient, creative.
It and I don't even know if it comes more from digging deep when you really have to. There's some of that, but there's also this like second nature in us that just kicks in when it needs to. You might say if you're evolution person that it stems from that, and we just kind of resort to that, or our body just kind of detours to it, or you could just say it's our higher nature,
Yes.
and it doesn't have to be one or the other. How whatever you want to attribute it to, I don't think in the instance of like stressful times, trying times, distracting times for me, sometimes these things just happen actually quite smoothly. The transition, not comfortably, but some shift has happened on a different level than we're used to operating on, higher or lower, wherever it came from. And it's quite natural. So natural, some of us, maybe complained while it was happening and didn't notice it was happening, and we're still here.
Right. And no, and that is last week when we were talking about it, and you like just kind of said to me, like, listen to how people are talking about the end of 2020. They
Right.
want to really let it go away quickly with a lot of like hate towards it.
You get that image of the thing we dare not speak its name. People just don't even want to say it.
Right. Like just be gone, over. And we really may be missing this opportunity to look at something that is in our inherent nature to not just survive, but to grow, to be somewhat better,
Right.
to be more connected as human beings. And Lori, you had also suggested that we just like kind of review 2020, like think back of 2020. And so my mind automatically went to March when the shutdown happened. And then I thought, wait a
Absolutely.
second, what happened before that?
That's
And
where that's how I
did
began.
you?
I pictured what we were doing the week before. Go ahead, I'm sorry, but
No,
yes,
but that's
it's just
so
ironic. I
because
did the
it was
same.
as if the year began in March when the quarantine began. So when I like really went back to January, I even had to do like some research, like what was happening before this, and I remembered the devastating fires.
Yes.
The Australia was on fire, and it was terrifying. And to me, that was like the wake up call of what have we done to our earth, right? The mother is burning. And then that little girl, like Greta, became this spokesperson for global warming and what's happening. What are you doing to the earth, to the children? And so much of that, like, began this wake up in me of we've got to think about like the kind of earth we're leaving to our children because the earth will survive. It is so resilient of heart. But as human beings, we might not survive with this death we're putting upon our planet by being thoughtless, careless. And then um, and then this global pandemic hits.
Took priority. I don't want to diminish anything else going on, but worldwide. If I
Worldwide.
had to include people that don't have access to American news and everything else, worldwide, nothing impacted people universally more.
And it was the first time I think that all of us were in a similar trauma space,
It's equalizing.
equalizing, because I was thinking even the oldest, our oldest humans never experienced a
I
pandemic, right? 100 years ago, was there a pandemic?
no. One of the things I did think of when looking back on, I guess, how people managed. And I do think there was a difference between people who at least have faced different levels of adversity in their life. And so some people maybe were more casual. Some people were more scared. And that's a lot to do with just experience. There's a lot to be said in any form for trauma, for pain, for adversity. And that it actually does strengthen you. And so you have some people that haven't, just very little experience. There's people in this pandemic, young adults, who don't remember 9/11. And that was shaping for a lot of people. Changed a
Yes.
lot. A lot
Yes,
of people went to
collective
church the
trauma.
next week. A lot of people left church the next week.
Right.
Whatever it was in them that was moved, there was big internal response. And that's a different level of responding to things. One of the things that rubbed me the wrong way, when I was actually trying to like summarize the year, it's very hard for me to do without judgment on the year itself, on us as a society, and on me individually, and other people individually, I should say also. But ironically, at the same time, it hurt me to witness almost this. Let me see how I can frame this to be delicate to everybody. Almost this sense of people's. It's the first time I've seen people judge people's reaction to adversity or trauma. The people that weren't scared, they're ignorant, or they're maybe uninformed, or they prioritize other things, or they just don't want to get it, or they don't care about others. The people that were scared, maybe it's your conspiracies. Maybe it's just like you're somehow less. They were chided. Some people were chided for being afraid.
Well, because it's survival, right? So when we go into the survival brain, there is like way more judgment that happens, way less room for kind of curiosity, because everybody needs to find this way to stay alive, fight, flight, make nice, whatever way that you are going to plug into that and move forward. So I would agree that we saw an amplification. And it's interesting because it's part of what fire does, right? Fire either amplifies, illuminates, or
Yes.
diminishes. And I do think that within this period, so much was amplified for us to be able to take a look, because this went on and on. None of us had a conception of what we were actually getting into. All we knew was that there was this dangerous virus that could kill us.
And when you hear that, we don't have enough information. This is what we know. And then now we kind of don't know that. And we know this, but somebody else thinks they know something. Having looked back and been where I've been throughout the year, my judgments, my love through the year, everything, at least when you look back, you can review it and kind of consider, next time, would I be a little gentler on myself? Would I be a little gentler on my neighbors?
Well, and maybe we will really have that chance, because I think that we're going to be in it for a while longer, and that's why it's so important to take the moment to look at what needs to be done slightly differently. What have I learned?
And it's
Go ahead.
one thing I've learned about myself. I've told you this before. I'm a power thrower. I'm the one that doesn't shift the gears on the bikes. I think I've told you. I'll keep that rough one because that's like moving things along. Uphill, downhill. I like that gear. And there are people like that. But I have learned that you need there that pacing in certain instances is appropriate, and stopping is, and being okay with yourself, no matter where you are. Ironically, survival is just not a race, and we're used to like running a race in our country, especially.
Now, to me, hearing that, it is, it it's lives in this place of resolve. Like within your experience, you had to resolve this belief, this way of existing that was more of the race, high gear, taking that terrain no matter what.
That's how I
No,
am.
right? And I love that expression. That's how I usually have always been.
That's how I operate. It is generally effective for me, but this wasn't a general year.
Right. And from that belief that needs to then be resolved to survive, out of that can come a new way of existing in the future. If
That's
I think about that,
that's
like,
big.
right, it is big because I'm asking myself as I'm saying this out loud, what did I have to resolve this year? Like what was the way I usually operated that was no longer effective? And if I, answer it honestly, I think one of the things that I had to resolve was that I I love setting goals and accomplishing and creating new
You're
things
a
in the
checker
world.
offer.
I love it. I'm like, yes, what's the next big vision that we're going to create? And suddenly, like, I could not operate this year from successful accomplishments. My sense of worth and success could not be measured by what in fact I was doing, because everything I was doing kind of fell to shit, if we're, allowed to say that. Like, it all just started to fall apart under this
Yes.
crunch. And so to go forward, it means to begin to, like, allow myself not to have that pressure of always having to accomplish something to have meaning.
Still accomplishing. It's how that's defined. That we're sitting here is a decent accomplishment. A lot of people, like you said, don't have the privilege of that accomplishment.
Right.
A lot of people are in the hospital today. A lot of people didn't make it.
Yes.
And we're left kind of reeling in certain losses, but we're here in a certain type of privilege
Absolutely.
of even having losses. There's a
Yes.
privilege with it. And having said that, I think 2020, as much as it took from a lot of people, it didn't take like in the form of pilfering. It 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 took from us very personal things, and more painful things that it took depended on how we valued those things. One of the things I'd thought about as I was considering this year, when I was a teenager, I used to read, the Taoist books.
Yes.
So I liked the drawings. So, oh, the sage.
Yes, yes, yes.
But I kept thinking at the end, all this, we were required on some level, whether people feel we were successful or not, we're here. And I do call that success. And if not success, opportunity to continue
Absolutely.
for a different level of success. But from the Taoism, I kept thinking, this year, if we have to take one thing with us, let it be what doesn't bend breaks. We all had to yield in a way that went against what we feel our nature, our makeup, just opposes who we are, who we want to be, our individualism. But that's when something is asked of the whole body, if you want to take humanity as the body, it's also kind of a valiant thing we did. Resistance or not, agreement or not, this, as a whole, we decided whether we agreed with authorities, that they had the authority or did not, the way that everything is structured in our nation and in the world gave way, and this is really beautiful to me, to the idea that we are a body and we value certain parts of our body the same as us. Even if there was grumbling, well, the flu was going to get him, or this, we were like, so be it. It's part of the body. We're going to do this. And we all act as different parts of our body. I'm making this up on the fly in case you can't tell. That's why I'm talking slow. So I think it impacted us different.
Well, you're talking about
We
what
felt it different.
Yeah,
Pain feels different in the toe than in the head. So we
Yes.
can't accuse each other of experiencing it different because we're not the same part of the body, but we are the same body. And it's a good choice on whatever level it was made, and it was honorable. The only thing that could give it more value is we get better at doing it.
So what I think you're saying,
Yeah, tell me.
help me to
No,
clarify.
help me.
Is that there is a vulnerability to being in a human body. We are vulnerable.
And
we
I mean,
are vulnerable.
the human body is one too of all of us.
Yes, and so in the individual human body, there's vulnerability.
Right.
In the collective human body, there is vulnerability. But if we are truly to inhabit, if our hearts, if our souls are to inhabit this body, then we must learn to yield. And I pull out that word that you said because yielding is not something that is really that valued in our culture. Like it's not yet.
right.
It is. And it's bringing me back to this memory where I was learning to drive and my driving teacher, we started to go on the highway, which you have to yield to get onto the highway. It terrified me and I was awful at it. Do I go? Don't I go? Do I let him in? Do I not let him in? I don't know. So anxious. And he was like, you have to just feel it. You have to feel it. It was kind of like this meditative process. I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about. So finally, one day, he spoke to me, I guess, in my language. He was like, listen, Marianne, if you don't learn to yield, you will never have love in your life. I'm like, what?
I love love.
I'll never have love in my life. I was like, I can't live without love. He's like, love is all about yielding.
Oh.
And that has
What a
stayed
gift.
with me
It
my
is.
whole life because when you said yield, it was like, we have to love each other
We do.
better.
And yielding sometimes can carry this connotation of all is lost. I
Right,
gave
giving
in.
up. Yes.
You win. It's not. And from the other side, sometimes people are trying to yield to our way. You and I had a conversation without details where you had said something, I disagreed, and then comes the yielding, and I had told you, thanks for being patient. Well, I was doing that part because if somebody could be entering traffic and they're just awkward at yielding and you could take that as opposition. You're like, I'm done with you. That's so ugly. That's not what yielding looks like.
I haven't learned yet. Right.
But they might be like, no. I am. I'm stutter stepping because this is how I yield. I'm still learning.
Right.
And it's just having that little bit of patience and compassion with each other. You have to ask yourself at some point, do you believe at the heart, the innermost point of a person where that person is most them, uniquely from everybody, but also in a dynamic way, so similar to everybody at the same time? Are people basically good or basically bad? It's the old question. I say good.
I would agree.
Do we believe that? then we would be patient with one another while they yield. And when they just can't, and when they can't, are we willing to?
Right. Right. And what did we have to, in fact, yield to? And if we are, you know, continuing to look at what is the difference between processing this year from the head, right, versus from the heart, from the mind. And I think that's where we do move out of what you were talking about earlier, the judgment, right? That kind of lives more in the mind into the heart, which can be curious about all things.
Right.
And that is a much more tender way to process and look. And the other thing is when you, again, you give me these beautiful directives that help me so much when you were like, just meditate on what 2020 was for you in the heart. And I had said this to you. I said, when I sat to meditate about it, I had the image of the mother of death and the mother of creation. And I don't really know what that means. And you were like, it'll unfold, right? You have such a trust for the language of the heart. So to me, the first thing was that the language of the heart can come more in this kind of metaphorical, symbolic way. And when I sat with that in March, the mother of death showed up, but at the same time, this mother of creation showed up because within us was this possibility of what we could give birth to, what we can not even yet conceive, but with the patience, what we can give birth to in fact, save ourselves, change ourselves. And then I was like, wow, from March to December is 9 months. Right?
Right.
We actually had a gestation period.
Ding, ding, ding.
Like, there are these two mothers here who are giving birth to something new. And in other times of plague and pandemic, moving through that then gave birth to the Renaissance, to the Roaring '20s, like this period of gestation during Great Threat can in fact give birth to a whole shift in, I believe, the paradigm on how we treat each other, how we treat the earth, these systems of belief that just don't work for justice. And so I am like feeling that potential in the moment that we are right now.
Potential's big. So it's finding a way to convert the potential to the kinetic. If you want to just run with it.
To action, right?
And that can happen. Funny you said that, Mary.
Really? Why?
Because I this might be kind of a loose way to link these, but one of the things that I had thought about moving forward, and I'll give a couple minutes to cover this, when I consider next year and this year and corrective measures or preventative, what's been learned, like one of the things that comes to me is everything is easier when you take care of the basics. You know, the hierarchy of needs. And incidentally, I had this list of questions that I needed it to be quick, so I didn't really let you prepare. I have actually, okay, look at the time we have, and I have 17 questions. Can I just read them all?
Read them all.
I'm asking you this as a healer, as a therapist.
Great.
Consider this my gift to whoever listens. But you got to do the work.
Great.
But since I thought of it, it's my little gift to them.
Beautiful.
Just let's take care of our base so we can work on the higher stuff that we're actually made for. And this is very practical things that troubled people this year that
Yes.
I heard over and over. Now, it's okay to answer as a therapist, but find a way to dig deep and give a little heart if possible.
Gotcha.
Okay. List of questions I've heard repeatedly. I feel overwhelmed with sadness. What can I do immediately to resolve this? The people in my house are driving me nuts, but they're all I have to connect to right now. What do I do? I feel scared with everything going on. I'm scared of getting sick. I'm scared of other people. I'm scared of my money scares, everything. How can I lessen this fear? I want to talk to somebody, but I just don't know who to call. What do I do? I've lost motivation being home all the time. I'm sick and tired of being home. Everybody seems to be handling things better than me. What's wrong with me? I love my kids, but I can't take this anymore. I need a break. What do I do? I keep gaining weight, but I can't stop snacking. Now, it may not or may not be that one, but one of my questions might be snuck in here. Some posts on social media trigger a strong negative reaction in me. It's making me so mad, really mad. But I also want to be on social media to pass the time. This is one of the few activities I have left. I have nothing to do all day. Was another question. I feel like I'm getting depressed. Is this something that's just happening to everybody, or is this me? I want or need connection. How can I do it in the middle of all this mess? How are people doing it now? I feel agitated and moody all the time. Has actually been told to me. And I've heard people say, I can't take this anymore. And this was actually one that I heard early on, but I wanted to shift it to the back. I've thoughts of suicide. Is this just, how do I know if this is a normal passing thought because I have extra time and the devil's doing his work? Or like, when does it become serious? So in a very awkward way, I've asked you a lot of questions. If you could just give any response for people to just think on before we come back and actually talk about the time between this year and next year. Let's get the base, like,
Well, I do think that there are two things.
okay,
And again, it will kind of, I think, tie into almost how our talk started today, which is the mundane
right,
and the sacred,
right,
the natural and the supernatural. And in the mundane world, there are some real factors, some real basic means of self-care that must be addressed. And part of what this pandemic has shown us is that some people have access to resources that others don't.
oh,
Some
yeah, you're
have
right,
masks, can get, a therapist online. Others don't. And so within that, what are the actual resources? What can we do on a basic way of survival? As simple as drink more water, breathe fresh air, eat 3 meals a day, make sure you're sleeping. That's basic. But then you also asked me, which is, how do you answer this from the heart? Which is very, very different, because the heart, inherent in the heart, is all not so much advice, but a way to hold us in this period of suffering that is unconditional love.
right,
That is a connection. And it goes back to, how can I help you to connect to your heart? So my main answer would be, when we had the school, right? Every day with the kids, they'd start their day with the most simple heart meditation,
oh,
right?
right.
4 breaths.
How quickly we forget.
The first breath, breathe in, drop into your heart. Second breath, breathe in, turn the light on in your heart, whatever way light shows up. third breath, see yourself sitting in the garden of your heart, however it looks today. And then the fourth breath, as you sit in that garden, being held in the arms of unconditional love, ask your question. What do I do? I've gained so much weight during this pandemic. And listen for the answer. And the answer may come in a voice, it may come in a symbol, it may come in a little animal coming up to you.
Leaf of lettuce.
Right. Receive it because the answer is there. And the answer will most likely be like, it's okay, you're here. You're here. We're going to get through it. You're not alone. You're connected. And you're not only by connecting to this suffering, you are connecting and breathing in the suffering of every other person out there who feels this loneliness. You are not alone. And I think that last question, about suicide is there is such a sense of complete aloneness, completely being in the void without connection that makes it intolerable. And you said to me, the most intolerable suffering comes from what, Lori?
I say separation from God or detachment from your heart.
Detachment from your heart.
That to me is the greatest pain in life. I said even more so than any loss I could imagine.
Well, because
And loss can feed into that separation, and I think that's where our pain comes from when we suffer loss.
And I really want to mark the end of the show with that because there is so much wisdom and truth in that. And coming from you, right, a mother who has to suffer the daily pain of having lost a child, it would be intolerable without your connection
Oh my gosh.
to your heart, to God, to a sense of your soul.
It's not possible for
It
me,
would not
right?
be possible. And so it all means we need these little exercises, these mundane exercises, 4 breaths into your heart that connect you.
We'll share that on the Facebook page.
Yes, please.
Okay, we'll share that
please.
so you guys
As-
can see it, and we'll be back actually tomorrow. We're gonna pre-record, but it'll be for tomorrow.
That would be great, really kind of looking ahead a little
That's
bit.
the question that I love. So what?
So
2020, 2021. So what?
Yeah.
All
And
right.
so farewell
And listen to
and
your heart.
love.